Hey everyone, today we're going to be talking about pricing and how amazing this is for businesses. Pricing is awesome because you can have everything else the same. The economic factors, the supply, everything. And if you just change the price to the right price, your business could make a lot more money. And I'm going to give you a brief illustration to explain this concept, a very simple example. So let's say we have a example company, let's call it the Gizmo business, and it sells one product, a gizmo. And right now you're selling it right smack dab in the middle, not too cheap, but not too expensive. With pricing, you can literally price this anywhere you want, from $0, which we'll get to, all the way up until infinity. And obviously some things are right off the bat just impractical, like you're probably not going to make a lot of money consistently selling this gizmo for $10 million each. No one's going to buy it, save for maybe the one ridiculous idiot, but probably not even him. Anyhow, you have this gadget here, and here it is. And you're making $50 every time you sell this thing. And with all the other factors staying the same, the marketing, the sales, and everything, you're bringing in about 10 sales a day. So that's about $500 from that one product every day. Now, on the flip side, you can choose to lower this. Now, oftentimes you don't know what's going to happen. It often depends on the business model, what you're selling, what service you're providing. But sometimes, depending on the product and service, something like what Sam Walton did with discount retailing in Walmart can happen, which is that you can price things just slightly above the cost of bringing it to the customer, and that alone will just shoot up the demand so much. So let's say you do this for this gizmo and you price it very, very, very cheap, and the demand shoots up to 1,000 sales every day, just as an extreme example. Now, even if you only make $5 per sale, that's $5,000. That's much more than you were making before with that $500. So as you can see, pricing is very important. And Sam Walton did this with discount retailing. Now, someone might ask, well, he was probably one of the first to figure it out. I'm not that smart. I'm not that innovative. Well, actually, no. What Sam Walton actually did was when he saw the discounting coming in from these competitors, it was this new thing called discount stores that was coming into his town and area and competing with his regular store. He knew that he had to adopt it or die, because he knew this was going to destroy all his profits. It's going to take all his customers and so forth. So he was not even close to the first to discover it. He was just like a regular retailer at the time, and he decided, hey, I'm gonna take this up, and heck, I'm gonna try to be the best as I can with it. So he started making his own discount retailing stores. So he was not the first. And again, if you proceed with the story, Sam Walton ends up overtaking the giants, a great David and Goliath story, and becoming the largest discount retailer known, Walmart. And then he got Sam's Club later, and again he overtook the giants at the time, Kmart and Target. Anyhow, with that being said, there's also other things you can do. And again, the actual equation that your business or service has with pricing is oftentimes unknown, and you don't know what it is. I mean, it could be like the demand might shoot off the roof if you price it this low, but then if it goes here, it just plateaus, and like all this time, like you're not making any extra money off any extra demand, even if you lower the price, or who knows where it goes. It's weird, and you have no freaking idea. So what can you do about that? Well, I'll get to that. Basically, you test, and oftentimes it's not easy to just test things. But there's also a bunch of other possibilities in terms of pricing. As I mentioned, you can go up onto infinity. Now, oftentimes the threshold hits a certain pricing point where anything above that is just ridiculous. The value that your merchandise or product brings is not worth that exorbitant of a price. Like a plastic flute made in China that you can mass produce for 1 cent each, and you have 100,000 in the factory, you're probably not going to be able to sell that for like $1 million each, because long story short, a competitor's going to see that if you are and undercut you, and then anything will just over time just be very quickly wiped away. But again, we do get into premium markets, and then there's elite things where it's this they'll do something extravagant, and their whole goal is to capture very small amount of people, because they're pricing it at such obnoxious levels based on how much it costs to produce it, that they're pretty much generating a lot of money. Now, oftentimes, again, competitors will come in once they see this and undercut it, but oftentimes you may get niche markets like those laptops and watches that are worth like $1 million made from pure gold, or those golden toilets. They're probably not getting many customers, but maybe once in a while some guy will come in. And so what you see here is oftentimes competition all around. So in the premium market, you get things where it's like it only costs this much, and yet you're selling it for this tremendous premium. Where does that come from? Why should someone pay so much? And for anyone to last in this market, my current opinion, based on my current knowledge and experiences, which may change over time, is that you can't really last in this area long unless you have some competitive advantage that makes people unable to copy you easily. And I guess you can see this in certain ways. Oftentimes it may just be something very weak, like for instance the $1 million watch thing. No one's gonna bother to maybe put up the time and resources to even do this, because they just think it's so preposterous, and no one comes to challenge you or compete with you. But again, weak defenses can be easily destroyed if someone chooses to compete with you. On the flip side, though, you have things like Prada purses, Tiffany's jewelry, Coach, all those purses, all those pieces of clothing, Ray-Bans, Louis Vuitton, Beats by Dr. Dre, the headphones. These things have exceptional premiums to the cost of creating the product. And the thing with that is that oftentimes it gets kind of weird, because you have all these counterfeiters coming in, and that's a whole nother story. But basically you have counterfeiters coming in from other countries who realize that's selling for that much and there's that much demand for it. Well, why don't we just make the same thing, because it costs piss. I mean, it costs like nothing to make it, and let's just sell it on a black market and make a lot of money off of it by undercutting the price. And even if they know it's fake, like sometimes we can make it just as good quality, or even if it's near good quality, you'll get customers coming in wanting to buy it because it looks close enough to the real thing. It happens with shoes too, Air Jordans. And therefore you get this whole dynamic of counterfeits coming in to overtake the demand of some of your customers and so forth. And yet it gets into a whole mess, and some of these people, some of these companies and businesses and products still make a lot of money. And as far as my personal taste, I don't really like that feel, because it's like, well, that's great for the customer, but at the same time it's not really great for anyone, because first off, the customer is getting ripped off because the company's deciding, hey, I'm going to price it exceptionally higher, than it costs to make, and ha ha ha, most of you can't get it. And then it's like, well, companies getting screwed over because there's counterfeiters coming in, and then on top of that, it's one of those things where it's like, is this really that valuable a product, or am I just peddling this thing that's way more highly priced than I should be selling it for? And all these sort of factors come in. God knows what's right or wrong. I don't know enough information about it really to really give a diagnosis of it myself. But it's very interesting to think and ponder about. And what you will find is that oftentimes the price is in certain ways justified, because if it were not, then no one would buy the product at all. And yet you have all these people out there choosing to spend this huge amount of money for this product, because I mean, there's a lot of factors. First off, the exceptional price in itself puts forth a scarcity and a elitist feel to it, and it often implies stuff like wealth and so forth, which add on to the premium of the product. Heck, you see it in a lot of weird products like alcohol, Patron as well. And so you have this premium going on where it's like, it's due to it's pushing out elitism and scarcity, which causes people to value it even more. And it can kind of cycle through, but oftentimes it's more so than that with something like Dr. Dre's headphones. If you've seen any YouTube video on audio comparisons and quality of the headphones, Beats gets dominated every time by headphones a fraction of its cost. And yet people almost always go for Beats. Why? Because first off, not a lot of people really go online and just do those comparisons and watch them, and they don't really understand that. Two, there's a hell of a lot of money put in the marketing and promotion for celebrities and athletes and musicians to wear these headphones in their music videos and stuff like that, which creates a culture, a pop culture of, wow, this is the thing, this is what we want to do, this is the headphones we want to get because all the cool people are wearing them, which brings out another sense of level of want or need that these better quality headphones without that brand recognition doesn't get. It's the same reason why the North Face jackets get so much demand, and yet there are jackets out there selling for a fraction of the cost that look the exact same just without the logo. I mean, you see it all the time. How many times have you seen a product and it's like, well, there's a product that's pretty much the same, but it doesn't have that brand logo. It's just like some no-name brand, and people flock to the one that everyone knows. So there is a certain level of value in that, and creating that value and sustaining it is really what's important. You don't want to get into a situation where it's like, well, this thing's going to die out in a year. It's just a pop culture thing, and then at that point it's just like you ride the wave for a year and then dump the whole thing, because afterwards it's just like no one's going to want to buy the product. So you have that thing, but to create long-term business value for 10, 20, 30 years, you want something that can really be sustained. One could argue it's the same thing with Coca-Cola and Pepsi. There's been a lot of blind taste tests done. One done at my high school. And it was very interesting because they did this blind taste test where they hid which cola was which. And they asked people to rate the taste with a store brand Coca-Cola from a supermarket. You know those store brand Coca-Colas that look like Coke, but everyone just thinks they're nasty? Well, they checked this out, and when it was blind and they didn't know the brands, they rated the store brands higher or equal quality and taste, and yet when the brands were revealed and they did another experiment with another group, Coca-Cola and Pepsi were the highest in rating. So a lot of it has to do with a certain level of brand recognition and so forth. And also with Coca-Cola and Pepsi, they have large economies of scale. Because they're so large, they can produce this for a fraction of the price at times. So it's very interesting how that works. And so for you or your product, perhaps you might want to consider that elitist or high-priced route rather than a low-cost route. So now let's go into testing. And as you can tell, there's so much other stuff, but I don't want to make this video too long, and I'm not a huge expert at it. There's people out there and books out there that go far beyond what I know about this. I'm just a novice getting into it, really. But let's get into how you figure it out, because oftentimes it's just this enigma. It's just like you don't know. Like, it differs depending on the company, the industry, the business, the product. The equation or algorithm or whatever for the pricing could be all over the place in terms of the demand and the bang for your buck. And so, you know, the more you peel it back, the more it starts getting to other things. Well, for instance, the high pricing, it has to do with the marketing and the money you're putting in to market that thing. For instance, Dr. Dre's headphones. Or the fact that Louis Vuittons and Ray-Bans are pretty big because they are oftentimes mentioned in rappers or singers' songs. Well, what does that mean? Do I have to keep paying these rappers for these songs? What if the songs are not hits? Well, what about... What if it dies down even if these rappers keep singing about these songs? Like, what's going to happen? And again, I always say for those sort of businesses, like, it's just unpredictable. You can't tell at all. Just there's nothing you can do. It's a very tough situation. Not nothing you can do, but it's very tough, and there's no answer. And you can't really predict what's going to happen. But the answer has to be, of course, testing. Now, for companies as big as Apple and the industry and product it has, I mean, it's very tough to test something like Apple in terms of pricing. Whether it's your iPhone, iPad, iPod, iTouch, whatever it is, it's very tough to test because even if you find some sort of geographic area where you can test and it's a controlled environment, I mean, I'm sure there's some Apple scientists or engineers who have come up with some sort of pricing test in different populations in the local area. It's like, well, there's so many factors. Like, what about this? What if this area is just a random weird area because it's in that area, and therefore you get weird demand results? And then it's like, well, is the demand really that great, or it's great because of the comparison to the demand and price that's currently in the market, and the fact that people heard about this and they're like, this is ridiculous. I'm going to buy as many as I can and try and get all my relatives who don't live in this geographic area and all my friends and all my parents, and I'll buy as many of them as I can, and therefore it's not even in this controlled geographic environment, and you can like restrict the experiment as much as you can, but you know, these people love the product so much, and then they boom, they're off into the races and illegally fudging what they know to get this cheap product, this cheap iPhone for 1/10 of the cost to their friends in another state. And then, I mean, there's stuff you can do like surveys, which may work, or other things. But if you're not part of a huge business, or you're just doing like online business, I would say it can be easier. Oftentimes, you can test different prices. You may not want to skip around too much though. And oftentimes you rarely ever see that too often.